When I opened that old leather-bound album on the top shelf of our home office, I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for printer paper. But trouble found me anyway. The cover was worn, the edges frayed like something handled too often, too carefully. And when I flipped the first page, the smell of new paper and old secrets filled the air. It wasn't just any photo album. It was a wedding album. And there he was, my husband, Daniel, smiling in a tuxedo I didn't recognize, his arm wrapped around a woman in white lace. Her face was half turned in laughter, but I knew that smile. I'd seen it across dinner tables, in group photos, at birthdays. It was Julia, my best friend's younger sister. My knees gave out before I could turn another page. The album slipped from my hands, and I sat there on the carpet, heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. In that moment, time felt like it slowed down, thick and heavy, like honey dripping from a spoon. Because there's something about betrayal that doesn't scream, it whispers. It breathes down your neck before you even know it's there. Daniel and I had been married for 8 years. To everyone around us, we were what people called stable. Not flashy, not dramatic, just steady. We had a small 2-bedroom house on the edge of town, a garden I loved, and a Sunday routine that felt like comfort. Grocery runs, laundry, church, late-night TV. We'd met in our 20s. Me, a literature teacher with too many dreams. Him, an accountant with a quiet charm and a shy smile. He had this habit of brushing his thumb over my knuckles when he held my hand, something that made me feel grounded, safe. Even now, sitting in that office, staring at the album on the floor, part of me wanted to believe there had to be some mistake. Maybe it was a photo shoot. Maybe he had modeled for a friend. But even as I told myself that, I saw the details that made denial impossible. The date embossed in gold letters on the inside cover, June 12th, 2015. That was 3 years after our wedding. My vision blurred. The air thickened. I remember the clock ticking on the wall, steady and cruel. We'd always been close to Julia's family. My best friend, Claire, and I had grown up side by side, neighbors, classmates, sisters in everything but blood. Julia was the baby of their family, sweet, soft-spoken, the kind of girl who apologized for things that weren't her fault. She used to visit us sometimes. Back when Daniel and I were newly married, she'd come for dinner or ask for help with her college assignments. Daniel was always kind to her. Too kind, maybe, but I never thought anything of it. She was like a little sister to me. I closed the album, trembling. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing. For a long time, I just sat there, hands on my knees, eyes unfocused. Then I did what every betrayed woman does at least once. I questioned my sanity. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was a look-alike. But I couldn't unsee the way he smiled at her in those pictures. It was the same smile he used to give me when I woke up beside him. That night, Daniel came home late. He worked long hours, so it wasn't unusual. I was sitting at the dining table, pretending to read, the album tucked under a pile of papers. When he walked in, he kissed the top of my head, like always. The smell of his cologne, cedarwood and citrus, hit me, and my stomach turned. "Long day?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Yours?" He sighed, rubbing his neck. Same old numbers, same old clients. He poured himself a glass of water. I studied him. His easy posture, the calmness in his voice, not a flicker of guilt. How do you look into the eyes of someone you thought you knew and realize they're a stranger? I wanted to ask right then, but the words caught in my throat like splinters. Instead, I smiled, a shaky, practiced thing, and said, "Dinner's in the oven." Because sometimes, before you tear your life apart, you have to sit quietly and make sure the pieces you think are solid really are. The next morning, after he left for work, I pulled the album back out. I examined every detail: venues, faces, guests I didn't recognize. There was a beach in the background, people dressed in light colors. The bride, Julia, wore a simple gown, barefoot in the sand. And Daniel, he looked happy. Not guilty, not forced, just happy. In one photo, Julia's mother stood beside them holding a bouquet. Claire wasn't there. That told me everything I needed to know. Because if Claire, my best friend, had known, she would have told me, wouldn't she? I couldn't stop shaking. That evening, I called Claire. We talked every week, but that night, my voice trembled in ways I hoped she wouldn't notice. "Hey, Claire," I said, keeping my tone light. "Just checking in. How is Julia these days?" There was a pause. "Julia? She's fine, I think. We haven't spoken much. She moved to Florida last year." Florida, the same beach location on the back of the album. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to scream, "Why didn't you tell me your sister married my husband?" But I didn't. Not yet. Because if the world was about to collapse, I needed to know which foundations were truly mine and which were built on lies. So I ended the call, thanked her for chatting, and sat in silence. Outside, rain started to fall. Soft, rhythmic, steady. Inside, my mind replayed every laugh, every late-night phone call between Daniel and a client, every time he said he was traveling for work, every time he said he was helping Julia with something. It all fit together now, like puzzle pieces I'd been too blind to see. And that's when the anger began to replace the shock. Not loud, fiery anger, but quiet, focused, bone-deep anger. The kind that makes you want to understand before you destroy. Because that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It makes you curious. The next day, I decided to visit Julia's mother. I told Daniel I was heading out to run errands. He kissed my cheek, said, "Don't forget the groceries," and went back to a spreadsheet like everything was normal. I drove 2 hours out of town to the old house where Claire and Julia grew up. The porch still creaked the same way it used to when we were kids. When Julia's mother opened the door, her face faded the moment she saw me. "Grace," she said softly, I didn't expect you." Her voice shook, and I knew. I didn't need to ask another question. Her eyes told me everything. I felt the weight of that album in my handbag, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about my husband's betrayal. It was about years of lies carefully woven between families. Julia's mother invited me in with a trembling hand. Her house smelled like jasmine and cinnamon, the same scent it always carried, but somehow even the air felt heavier that day. We sat at the kitchen table, where I had eaten countless Sunday dinners with their family growing up. The teapot between us hissed softly, and for a long while, neither of us spoke. She was the first to break the silence. "Julia, I always hoped this day would never come." Her voice cracked on my name, and in that single moment, I knew she had been carrying this truth for years. "How long?" I whispered. "How long have you known?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Since it happened, since they came here, asking for a quiet ceremony. I told them it was wrong. I begged Julia not to do it. But she said—" She stopped herself. "She said he told her you two were separated, that you didn't want him anymore." My stomach twisted. Separated? She believed him, Grace. She really did. I laughed bitterly. It wasn't a pleasant sound. It was the kind of laugh that hurts coming out, sharp and hollow.
So, he lied to her, lied to me, lied to everyone. Her mother's shoulders slumped, as if she'd been waiting 8 years to exhale. He made her promise to keep it secret, said the paperwork was complicated, that once things were settled, they'd make it official. Official, I repeated. He was already married. She nodded slowly, wiping a tear. She moved away after she found out the truth. That's why she went to Florida. My chest ached. Julia hadn't been the only one betrayed. She had been another victim of his manipulation, just like me. I stared at the floral tablecloth, tracing its faded pattern with my fingers. Does Claire know? Her mother hesitated. No, we didn't want to destroy her friendship with you. Julia begged us not to tell anyone. She thought if she disappeared, it would hurt less. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I just sat there, breathing shallowly, feeling my pulse echo in my ears. Then I stood. Thank you for telling me. Grace, she said softly, her eyes full of pity, whatever you decide to do, please remember, Julia already paid her price. She's alone now. She's not the villain you think. I nodded. I'll remember that. But inside, something hard and cold had started to form. Because even if Julia was innocent, Daniel wasn't. That night, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I wanted him to feel comfortable, safe in his lies before I tore the illusion apart. He came home like always, smiling, asking for dinner. I cooked, smiled back, even kissed him goodnight. But the taste of deceit lingered like poison on my tongue. Lying beside him that night, listening to his steady breathing, I wondered how many nights he had spent beside her, whispering the same lies, making the same promises. I turned my back to him and stared into the dark, my mind racing. The next morning, I called Claire again. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. You said Julia moved to Florida, right? Do you have her number? Her number? No. Why? I just wanted to check on her, old times. Claire hesitated. Grace, don't. Julia's been through a lot. It's better to leave her be. That caught my attention. Been through a lot? What do you mean? Just heartbreak, regret. I don't know all the details, but she hasn't been herself for years. I swallowed hard. Heartbreak and regret. Now I knew the full circle of Daniel's cruelty. For the next week, I acted like everything was normal. I cooked, cleaned, went to work, all while collecting pieces of evidence. Receipts, photos, messages. In our home office, I found a hidden drawer behind his filing cabinet. Inside were 2 documents, a lease agreement under Julia's name, and a set of photographs of a small beach house. The same beach house from the album. So he had been paying for her place, even after she moved away. The betrayal burned, but beneath the pain, something else stirred, a calm, precise sense of control. Because if Daniel had taught me anything, it was patience. One evening, I made sure he was home early. I cooked his favorite meal, rosemary chicken with lemon rice. I even opened a bottle of wine. He smiled as he sat down. Wow, what's the occasion? I smiled back. Just felt like celebrating. He raised an eyebrow. Celebrating what? I leaned back, folded my arms, and said, Your second marriage. His color drained from his face. What? I tilted my head. You know, the one in June 2015, the one with Julia. The one you forgot to mention? He froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the kitchen clock. Then he laughed. A nervous, hollow sound. Grace, that's ridiculous. Really? I said calmly, reaching under the table. I placed the album on the surface, its leather cover glowing under the light. Then what's this? He stared at it, his jaw clenched. I found it in your office. You want to tell me why you're smiling in a wedding photo with my best friend's sister? He stood up, pacing. It's not what it looks like. It looks like you married someone else while still married to me. Grace, please. His voice shook. It wasn't a real marriage. It was complicated. Complicated? I repeated. You had a ceremony, rings, vows, a bride, Daniel. That's not complicated. That's deceit. He rubbed his temples. You don't understand. I thought our marriage was over. You were distant. Don't you dare blame me. I stood now, voice steady but trembling at the edges. You could have talked to me. You could have left. Instead, you lied. To me. To her. To everyone. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. I made a mistake. She knew it couldn't last. It was just... Just what? I demanded. A hobby? A game? A spare life? He didn't answer. That silence, that heavy, shameful silence, said more than words ever could. Finally, I whispered, You destroyed 2 women's lives, Daniel, mine and hers, and you act like it's paperwork. He sank into the chair, face buried in his hands. I'm sorry, he murmured. I stared at him, this man I once thought I knew, and felt nothing. No tears, no rage, just emptiness. That night, I packed a small suitcase. He didn't stop me. Maybe he knew he couldn't. When I closed the door behind me, the air outside felt cold and alive. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I drove aimlessly for hours before ending up at Claire's house. She opened the door, her face lighting up with confusion. Grace, it's late. What's wrong? I held up the album. Sit down, I said softly. We need to talk about your sister.
Claire stared at the album in my hands like it was a live grenade. She blinked once, twice, then shook her head slowly. Grace, what are you talking about? I placed the album gently on her coffee table and opened it to the first page. The photo of Daniel and Julia stood there, smiling, sunlit, frozen in a moment that had no right to exist. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God! I sat down across from her, my voice barely above a whisper. Did you know? Her eyes widened. No? Grace, no! I knew Julia had some secret, something that broke her. But this? She flipped through the pages, her fingers trembling. She never told me it was Daniel. She just said she got mixed up with a married man. She said she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. My throat ached. And you never thought to ask who? She was fragile, she said, tears spilling now. I didn't want to pry. She begged me not to ask. The weight of it all settled between us like a fog. For years, I'd sat beside Claire, laughing, crying, sharing dinners, while both of us unknowingly lived on opposite sides of the same lie. And now, sitting there under her warm yellow lamp, that truth bound us together in the cruelest way possible. After a long silence, Claire looked at me with red, wet eyes. What are you going to do? I stared at the album. I don't know yet. She nodded slowly, then reached for my hand. Grace, please don't hate Julia. She made a mistake, but she's been punishing herself for it ever since. I don't hate her, I said softly. I hate what he did to both of us. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my car, parked outside the old elementary school, where the lamppost light flickered in rhythm with my heartbeat. Daniel's voice echoed in my mind, all those little moments that now sounded like confessions I hadn't recognized. I just want a fresh start. You deserve better than me. It's complicated. Complicated.
the favorite word of a man who built his life out of half-truths. I thought about Julia, how young she'd been then, how easily he must have woven his web around her, and for the first time, I didn't see her as my enemy. I saw her as another version of me. Someone who wanted to be loved so badly, she ignored the warnings. The next morning, I called her. Her voice on the other end was hesitant, quiet, almost afraid. "Hello?" "Julia," I said softly. "It's Grace." Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "Grace, oh my God, I didn't think I'd ever hear from you." "I found the album." Another silence, then a quiet, broken whisper. "I figured you would. Eventually." I gripped my phone tight. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't," she said, her voice trembling. "I was ashamed. When I found out he never divorced you, I wanted to disappear, and I did. I moved away, changed my number. I thought if I buried it deep enough, maybe it would stop haunting me. But it didn't, did it?" "No, it never does." I closed my eyes. "He lied to both of us, you know that, right?" "I know," she said softly. "And I'm sorry, Grace, truly. If I could undo it, I would." There was something so raw in her voice that it shattered the last bit of anger in me. I realized then, this wasn't just my story, it was ours. "Julia," I said quietly, "I'm not calling to fight. I just needed to hear it from you, to close the door." She exhaled shakily. "Then close it, Grace. You deserve peace. So do I." 2 weeks later, I filed for divorce. Daniel didn't fight it. He barely said a word when I served the papers. I think part of him knew there was nothing left to salvage, not even pretense. The house we once shared became mine to sell. I boxed up everything I didn't want, the dishes we picked together, the photos from vacations that now felt like lies, the wine glasses still holding the ghost of our last dinner. But I kept one thing, the album. Not as a trophy of pain, but as a reminder. A reminder that love without truth is just a performance, and I had been his most loyal audience. Months passed. Life moved on in small, cautious steps. I got a new apartment, small but full of light. I started a new job. And every morning when I poured my coffee, I reminded myself that peace doesn't come when the pain ends. It comes when you stop letting it define you. Claire and I remained close. Our friendship, though scarred, survived. Maybe because both of us were bound not by betrayal anymore, but by understanding. One evening she called. "You'll never guess who reached out to me," she said, her voice a mix of hesitation and hope. "Julia?" She paused. "Yeah. She's coming back to visit Mom. She wants to see you." My chest tightened. "To see me?" She said she doesn't expect forgiveness. She just wants closure. A week later, we met at the little park near our old school, the same one where we used to play when we were girls. Julia looked older, thinner, but her eyes were the same, soft, searching, and sad. "Hi." "Hi." For a moment, neither of us knew what to do. Then she stepped forward and hugged me, tentatively, as if afraid I might pull away. I didn't. Because as much as she had hurt me, I understood now, we were both casualties of the same man's cowardice. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything." I nodded against her shoulder. "I know." We sat on the old swings for hours, talking, not about him, but about life, about how love can blind you, how silence can destroy you, and how healing never really feels like victory. It just feels lighter. When the sun dipped below the trees, she stood to leave. I hope you find someone who never makes you question what you mean to them. I smiled. You too. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you for not hating me. I did, I admitted, for a long time. But hate is just another kind of chain. That night, I went home and finally opened the last page of the album. There, tucked behind the photo sleeves, was a note in Daniel's handwriting, dated the week of their ceremony. To Julia, my new beginning. I tore the note in half, then into pieces so small they disappeared between my fingers. Then I placed the album back on the shelf, not as anger, but in peace. Because I had finally learned that closure doesn't come from confrontation or revenge or making the other person see your pain. It comes when you decide the story doesn't own you anymore. The next morning, I walked out of my apartment with no ring, no guilt, and no ghosts. Just sunlight, coffee, and the quiet, steady heartbeat of a woman who finally knew what freedom felt like. And maybe that's what love is supposed to teach you. Not how to hold on, but how to let go with grace.
It's strange, isn't it? How something as small as a photograph can hold an entire lifetime. A love, a lie, a loss, all pressed between the pages like dried flowers. For months after everything ended, I couldn't bring myself to delete Daniel's number. It wasn't because I wanted him back. It was because I wasn't ready to accept that the version of him I loved never truly existed. He tried calling a few times after the divorce, once on my birthday, another time after his mother passed. Each time, I let it ring. Not out of anger, but because I had already buried that chapter. And sometimes when something's dead, the kindest thing you can do is stop digging. My therapist once told me that betrayal doesn't start with the act, it starts with silence. The silence of things left unsaid, questions unasked, instincts ignored. I think about that a lot. There were so many silences in our marriage. The way Daniel never talked about his past, the way I never asked why he avoided my eyes when I said, "I love you," the way we both mistook quiet for peace. Now I know, peace has a sound. It's the hum of your own heart when you finally stop pretending. One afternoon, I ran into Daniel by accident at the grocery store. He was in the produce aisle, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. She looked kind, soft around the eyes. He froze when he saw me. "Grace," he said, his voice cautious, uncertain. "Daniel." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then, I noticed something different about him. He looked smaller somehow, not in height but in presence, like a man carrying the weight of every lie he ever told. "I didn't think I'd see you again," he said. "I didn't plan to." He swallowed hard, glancing at the woman beside him. I don't need to know," I interrupted gently. "Whoever she is, I just hope you're honest this time." He nodded slowly, shame flickering across his face. "I'm sorry, Grace, for all of it." I smiled faintly. "I believe you're sorry. I just don't think you understand what sorry costs." Then I turned and walked away. Not out of pride, but out of peace. For the first time, my heart didn't ache when I looked at him. It just rested. A few months later, I visited Claire and her family. Julia was there too, helping her mom in the garden. When she saw me, she smiled, a real unguarded smile.
We talked over tea while the sun sank low. She told me she'd started therapy, that she was rebuilding her life one step at a time. Sometimes, she said, I still see his face when I close my eyes, but then I remind myself he's not the lesson, he's just the proof. The proof of what? I asked. That I can survive what I thought I couldn't. I nodded slowly. That makes two of us. We both laughed softly, and for the first time, the sound didn't feel weighed down by the past. It felt like release. After that day, I started journaling, writing down everything I'd learned, not about men or marriage, but about myself. I wrote about the small ways I had silenced my own instincts, the times I chose comfort over truth, and the moments I mistook being chosen for being loved. Somewhere between those pages, I realized healing isn't loud. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It's quiet, steady, like a sunrise you don't notice until it's already bright. One Sunday morning, I went to the beach alone. I brought the wedding album with me, the same one that had once shattered me. The waves were calm that day. The air smelled of salt and renewal. I flipped through the pages one last time, tracing the edges of the photos, the smiles, the fabric of the dress I never knew existed. Then, I placed the album down on the sand, tore one page out, just one, and watched as the tide slowly took it. Not in anger, not in grief, but in gratitude. Because that chapter, painful as it was, taught me how to finally meet myself, the woman I'd been too afraid to become while living in someone else's shadow. Now, when people ask if I believe in love, I tell them yes, but I believe in a love that's honest, a love that doesn't hide in the corners of half-truths or borrowed promises, a love that doesn't need to be proven through pain. I don't believe in fairy tales anymore, but I do believe in redemption, in second chances not for the ones who broke us, but for ourselves. And sometimes, when I'm sitting by my window at night, sipping tea and listening to the hum of the city below, I whisper a quiet thank you. Not to Daniel, not to Julia, but to the woman who finally decided that being alone was better than being deceived. That woman was me. I hope that wherever Daniel is now, he's learned that truth doesn't destroy love, lies do. And I hope that Julia has found peace too, because I finally have. And if you're listening to this, maybe you needed to hear that you can rebuild. That heartbreak doesn't end your story, it simply hands you the pen back. When I close my eyes now, I no longer see the wedding album. I see a sunrise. And it's enough.
You know, sometimes life doesn't give you the closure you hoped for. Sometimes it just gives you a moment, a deep breath, and the courage to keep walking. I learned that forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. It's about letting yourself out of the anger, the confusion, the endless why. So, if you've ever discovered a truth that broke your heart, I want you to remember this. You can't control what people hide from you, but you can control what you do once you finally see it. Would you have forgiven her or him, or would you have walked away like I did? Tell me in the comments. And if my story spoke to your heart, make sure to subscribe, because sometimes the stories that hurt the most are the ones that teach us who we really are.